napkin back up gently, and I put it somewhere safe. I was going to need it. And I was finally, fully done being told what I couldn't do on my own. I need to be clear about what this was and what it wasn't, because it matters to me that you understand I didn't win a lottery. This was not a windfall. Nobody handed me a fortune at the dramatic moment. What that bank screen showed me was a robbery, mine, in progress for years, and everything that happened next was me clawing back what was already legally mine. The money in that account was money my grandfather had given me, on purpose, with my name on it. It was never my mother's, so I wasn't getting rich. I was recovering stolen property, the way you'd recover a car somebody took out of your driveway. That distinction kept me honest through the whole thing. I never once wanted more than what was mine. I didn't want my parents' retirement savings, didn't want Cody's truck, didn't want a cent that wasn't already supposed to be in that account. I just wanted back what had been taken, and I wanted the people who'd taken it to stop pretending I was the helpless one. And to get it, I couldn't just confront my mother in a screaming match, because she'd talk her way out of that the way she'd talked her way through my entire childhood. I needed it, the way I'd needed Pop Leo's note, in writing. Provable. Cold and clear and outside the reach of her excuses. So I made a plan that night. An ER triage plan for my own family. Statements? Already done. A lawyer, next. A formal fraud claim with the credit union, alongside it. And then, only then, when the truth was documented and undeniable, the conversation. Not a screaming match. A presentation. I wasn't going to fight my mother on her turf, with feelings and volume, where she always won. I was going to bring her somewhere she'd never beaten me, the realm of the written down. I found a lawyer named Tom Avery, an estate and elder law attorney 2 towns over, and I brought him the statements and the napkin and the dates. He listened the whole way through without interrupting, which is how you know someone's actually thinking. When I finished, he set down his pen. "Ms. Doyle," he said, "I want to make sure you understand how strong this is, because people in your position often think they have less than they do." He laid it out. The account was mine, solely, demonstrably. My grandfather's power of attorney, whatever it had once allowed, had terminated the instant he died, automatically, by law. Every transfer my mother made out of my account after that date was unauthorized, full stop. "This isn't a misunderstanding between family members," Tom said. "This is conversion, possibly criminal. At minimum, you have strong grounds to demand the funds back, and the credit union's own fraud process may reverse some of it directly." He tapped the napkin, in its little plastic sleeve now. "And this is unusually helpful. It establishes your grandfather's intent and explicitly excludes your mother. Juries and judges like intent. So do banks." For the first time since the porch, I felt the ground go solid under me. I asked him the question I needed answered before I did anything. "I don't want to destroy my family if I don't have to," I said. "I want my money back. Can we do this in a way that gives them the chance to make it right before it becomes a criminal case?" Tom nodded slowly. "We can lead with a demand and a recovery plan," he said. "Whether it stays civil depends entirely on how they respond." Good, I thought. I'll give them the chance. More of a chance than they gave me on a porch in the snow, but the choice would be theirs, in writing, on the record. The credit union doesn't sit on a fraud claim. Within days, their fraud department reached out to verify activity, and the moment my mother got a call from the bank instead of a call from me, the temperature changed again. Only this time it was her turning cold and then hot. The first text was ice. "I don't know what you've started, but you need to stop it immediately." I didn't answer. The next one, a day later, had a crack in it. "Rachel, the bank called me. Whatever you think you saw, it is not what it looks like. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret." Still I didn't answer, because I'd learned, finally, that answering my mother was how she got her hooks in. Every conversation was a door she could walk through. The statements couldn't be argued with. My silence couldn't be twisted. So I let the paper do the talking and I kept my mouth shut. And it drove her to a fury I'd never seen, because for the first time in my life, she couldn't manage me. She couldn't flatter me into smallness or shame me into silence, because I wasn't on the phone to be flattered or shamed. By the end of that week, the texts were coming in clusters, swinging between threats and tears, and every single one confirmed what the screen had already told me. An innocent woman doesn't panic like that. An innocent woman says, "Check whatever you want. It's all fine." My mother said, "Stop. And don't. And you'll regret this. And it's not what it looks like." Those are not the words of someone who's been wronged. They're the words of someone who's been caught. I screenshot every one of them and sent them to Tom Avery, and I went back to work in the ER, where at least the bleeding was honest. Cody found me at the hospital, in the parking lot after a shift, which took some effort, and told me my mother had sent him. He was a mess, angry and scared and trying to be intimidating, which has never been Cody's strong suit. "What are you doing to Mom?" he said. "She's freaking out. You're trying to send her to jail over money?" I leaned against my car, still in my scrubs, too tired for theater. "Cody," I said, "do you know where the money for your truck came from? Your apartment deposit? The debts that disappeared?" He opened his mouth and closed it, and in that pause I saw that some part of him knew, or had chosen not to know, which is its own kind of knowing. "Mom said it was family money," he finally said, weaker now. "She said it was an account that was, like, all of ours. Family money." There it was, the phrase she'd used to launder it in her own mind and in his. "It was an account our grandfather put in my name, Cody," I said. "Just mine. He left me a note telling me to keep it away from her because she'd spend it. And she spent it. On you." I watched that land. Cody isn't cruel. Not really. He's just been the favorite so long he never asked what the favoritism cost or who paid for it. "I didn't know," he said, and I think it was even true. "I didn't ask." "No," I said. "You didn't. That's the whole problem with being the one they protect. You never have to ask where it comes from." He didn't have an answer for that. He stood in the cold parking lot looking younger than 28, and for the first time I felt something other than envy toward my brother. I felt sorry for him. He'd been bought with my money and never even knew the price. When threats didn't work and Cody didn't work, my mother reached for the oldest tool in her kit. Guilt. She called, and for once I picked up, because Tom had advised me that a documented attempt to resolve things would only help me, so I let it record in my memory and said almost nothing. Her voice was soft now, wounded, maternal. "Rachel, sweetheart, I think this has all gotten so out of hand," she sniffled. "Are you really going to send your own mother to prison? Over money your grandfather basically meant for the whole family anyway, after everything your father and I have done for you?" I let the silence stretch, the way Joan had let her own silence stretch at the bank. Then I said, evenly, "Grandpa didn't mean it for the family, Mom. He put it in my name and he left me a note about you specifically." A sharp little intake of breath. She hadn't known about the note. "I don't want you in prison," I went on, which was true. "I want my money back. Every dollar you took after he died, which is all of it that mattered. You have a chance to make this right before it goes any further. That's more of a chance than you gave me." She switched instantly from tears to ice, the mask slipping clean off. "After everything, you're choosing money over your family," she said. And I almost laughed, because there it was, the projection so perfect it was almost art. "No, Mom," I said. "You did that 6 years ago. I'm just the one who finally noticed." And I hung up, gently, while she was still talking, and I sat with my own steady heartbeat, and I realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. You stop being afraid of someone the day you can see the whole trick. While my mother swung between threats and tears, the boring, beautiful machinery of the law just kept turning. The credit union completed its review and determined that a portion of the transactions qualified for reversal under their fraud policy, the cleanest cases, the unauthorized transfers with the clearest documentation. That money started moving back toward my account. Not as a gift, not as a windfall, but as a correction. A wrong being made less wrong by people whose job is to make ledgers honest. Tom Avery drafted a formal demand letter laying out the rest, the full accounting, the dates after my grandfather's death, the legal reality that a power of attorney dies with the principal, the note, and a number, the total my mother owed me, calculated to the dollar. He sent it certified mail, the kind you have to sign for, so there could never be a question of whether she received it. I want you to notice how unglamorous this all was. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation in those weeks, just statements and letters and a fraud analyst named Dave who called me twice to confirm details. That's how you actually win against someone like my mother. Not with a better speech. She'll always have a better speech. You win by moving the fight to a place where speeches don't count, where the only thing that matters is what's documented and what the law says, and on that ground, for the first time in my life, I was holding every card. My mother was used to winning the argument. She had no idea how to win the paperwork. And as the demand letter sat in her mailbox waiting for her signature, she did the thing people like her always do when they're cornered. She called everyone to the table, A family dinner, she announced, to settle this. As a family. My father called me the night before that dinner, and it's the closest any of them came to grace. He's a quiet man, my dad, conflict-shy to the point of cowardice, and he'd spent the whole crisis exactly where he spends every crisis, in the den with the door closed. But that night he called, and his voice was rough. "Rachel," he said. I knew. Just that, at first. Then it came out of him in pieces. He'd known your mother was taking from the account. He'd told himself it was borrowing, that she'd pay it back, that it wasn't his business to police his wife. He'd watched her tell me at the funeral that there was nothing, and he'd said nothing, because saying something would have meant a fight, and my father would rather lose a daughter than have a fight. "I should have told you years ago," he said, and he was crying now, the awful held-back crying of a man who never learned how. "I let it happen. I let her put you out in the snow. I'm so ashamed." And I believed him, and it hurt more than my mother's threats, because his was the cowardice of a man who loved me and still wouldn't move. "Dad," I said gently, "thank you for telling me. I mean that." Then I said the hard part. "But I'm not stopping. The money's mine, and I'm getting it back, and I'm not going to pretend at that dinner tomorrow that this didn't happen." He was quiet a long moment. "I know," he said. "I just wanted you to hear once that you were right. You were always the strong one. We used that against you. I used it against you. It wasn't enough, but it was true, and it was the first true thing anyone in that house had said to me in years, and I held on to it." The family dinner was set for the first Sunday of the new year at my parents' house, and my mother stacked the room. Aunts, uncles, a couple of cousins, the same audience that had watched me get narrated down at Christmas. I understood exactly what she was doing, because it was the move she'd run my whole life. Surround me with relatives, frame me as the greedy, vengeful daughter dragging the family through the mud, and apply enough collective pressure that I'd back down just to make the discomfort stop. She wanted me outnumbered. She wanted a jury she'd already bribed with her version of the story. The old me would have walked into that room and folded, because the old me couldn't stand being the problem in front of people. But I wasn't bringing the old me. I was bringing a folder. Tom had prepared a clean packet for me, copies of the key statements, the timeline, the legal summary, and a copy of Pop Leo's note. I put it in a plain envelope, and I drove out to the house I'd been thrown out of 2 weeks before, through the same streets, in the same car. I wasn't nervous, which surprised me. I'd spent the worst nights of the year in a motel and a hospital break room, and I'd come out the other side standing. There's nothing a room full of disapproving aunts can do to a woman who's already been locked out in the snow and survived it. I parked. I sat for a second and touched the envelope on the passenger seat, the way you touch something to make sure it's real. Then I walked up the porch steps, past the door that had been locked against me, and I let myself into my mother's ambush, carrying the one thing she had no answer for: the truth, in writing. The living room was full, and the air was already arranged against me. My mother had gotten there first, in every sense. She sat in the center of the couch like a woman holding court, my father beside her staring at his hands, Cody and Brielle off to the side, and a half circle of relatives in the good chairs holding cups of coffee and pre-loaded opinions. My mother started before I'd even sat down. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice trembling with rehearsed hurt. "I didn't want to do this so publicly, but I think Rachel needs to hear from the whole family." She turned those wet eyes on me. "Rachel has decided, over some misunderstanding about Grandpa's old accounts, to accuse me, her own mother, of stealing. She's gone to lawyers, to the bank. She's trying to have me charged with a crime." A murmur went around the room, the soft, disapproving sound of people who'd been told one side. An aunt shook her head at me. "We took her in," my mother went on, gaining steam. "We let her live here when she had nowhere to go, and this is how she repays us. I always said it. You all know I did. That girl is desperate and she can't do anything on her own, so now she's inventing a story to take money she didn't earn." There it was, the whole strategy in one breath, the eviction rewritten as charity, the theft rewritten as my fantasy, the word desperate deployed one more time to make me small. I felt the old pull, the lifelong urge to shrink, to apologize, to make the discomfort go away by disappearing. The whole room was leaning into her story, and then I felt the envelope in my hand. And I remembered that I had spent 14 years carrying my grandfather's warning without reading it, and I was done being the only person at this table who didn't get to finish a sentence. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Can I show everyone something?" And I opened the envelope. I laid the pages on the coffee table in the middle of the room, one at a time, so everyone could see. "This is a bank statement," I said, calm as a vital signs report. "For an account my grandfather opened in my name when I was 18. Only my name." I set down the next page. "These are the withdrawals and transfers out of it. Dozens of them, over years. Every one of them goes to an account belonging to my mother. I never authorized a single one." A few of the aunts leaned in despite themselves. "Mom told me at Grandpa's funeral that he left nothing, that there was no account, nothing to inherit. She said that so I'd never look." I set down the third page, the timeline, and I put my finger on a date. "This is the day Grandpa died. A power of attorney ends the moment a person dies. That's the law, in every state. Every transfer after this date came out of my account, with no authority at all. That's not a family misunderstanding. My lawyer calls it conversion. The bank calls it fraud, and they've already started reversing it." The room had gone very quiet. My mother's face was doing something I'd never seen it do. Cracking. And then I laid down the last page, the one I'd been saving, a copy of a soft yellow napkin. "And this is a note my grandfather folded into my wallet when I was 18. I only read it 2 weeks ago." I read it aloud, steadily. "For when you have to stand on your own. This is yours, Rachel. Nobody else's. Don't tell your mother, because she'll spend it. Some people love you and steal from you in the same breath." I looked up. He knew. 6 years before any of this, my own grandfather knew exactly what she'd do. That was when my mother came up off the couch screaming, "That money was for this family. After everything I did for you, you ungrateful, scheming, you'd humiliate me in my own home over money your grandfather would have wanted us to have." She was shaking, pointing, her composure gone completely. And the whole room was staring at her now instead of me, because a woman who's been wronged doesn't scream like that. A woman who's been caught does. I stayed in my chair. I kept my voice low. "Grandpa knew you'd say that, Mom," I said. "He wrote it on a napkin when I was 18. And the room, finally, was silent enough to hear the truth in it. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my Uncle Ray, my mother's own brother, reached down and picked up the timeline and the statement and read them slowly, the way a careful man reads. He looked at the date of my grandfather's death. He looked at the transfers that came after it, and he set the pages down and said, into the silence, not to me, but to the whole room, "She's not the one who couldn't take care of herself." It landed like a stone in still water. The word my mother had hung on me my whole life, desperate, helpless, can't do anything on her own, drifted across the room and settled at last on the person it actually fit. Cody made a weak sound of protest. "This is insane. Mom didn't—" But then his eyes caught one of the transfer lines, a date he recognized, the month of his truck, and his own name was nowhere on the document, but the timing told him everything, and he stopped. He just stopped. My mother looked around the room for her audience and found it gone. The aunts who'd shaken their heads at me were now looking at her, at the screaming woman standing over a coffee table full of proof, and the story she'd told had simply evaporated in the face of paper. She turned to me, grasping, and reached one last time for the weapon that had always worked. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't do anything on your own." And I stood up finally, and I looked my mother in the eye, and I gave her sentence back to her with the only correction it had ever needed. "I did all of this on my own, Mom," I said, "including catching you." My father put his face in his hands. Nobody in that room ever called me desperate again. I didn't want to stand over my mother like a victor. That's not what Pop Leo's note was for, and it's not who I wanted to be when this was over. So before I left, I told them where things stood, plainly, the way you tell a family a prognosis. "Here's what happens now," I said to the room. "The bank is reversing what it can. My lawyer sent Mom a letter with the rest of what she owes me and a plan to pay it back. If she signs it and makes it right, I'm not asking for anyone to be arrested. I don't want my mother in prison. I want what my grandfather left me, which was always mine." I looked at her. "But I'm not dropping the claim so this can be buried. It happened. It's written down now. And it doesn't get erased to keep the peace." I picked up my pages, all but the copies, and slid them back in the envelope. "I'm not going to be in this family's life the way I was. I won't be the strong one you lean on while you call me the weak one. That's over." I said it without heat, which somehow made it land harder. "If any of you want a real relationship with me, the door's open. But it's my door now, and it locks from my side too. Then I walked out. I was the first one to leave, which I'd never been in my life. Always the last. Always cleaning up. Always making sure everyone else was settled before I moved. I walked down the porch steps past the door that had been locked against me on Christmas, and I got in my car, and I drove to the motel that had become more of a home than that house ever was. I didn't cry. I felt, for the first time in years, completely my own. Here's how it settled, over the months that followed. The credit union reversed the transactions that qualified, and a good portion of my money came back that way. Quietly, line by line, a ledger being made honest. For the rest, my mother faced a simple choice that her lawyer surely explained to her in plainer terms than I ever could. Sign the repayment agreement and avoid criminal exposure, or fight it and risk a fraud charge with a paper trail a first-year prosecutor could win. She signed. Of course she signed. People who count on never getting caught fold fast once they are. The repayment plan isn't fast and it isn't comfortable for her, and I've made my peace with the fact that some of it I may never fully see. But most of what was mine came home, and more importantly, it came home labeled correctly. Recovered. Not given. Not borrowed. Recovered. I moved into my apartment in February, the one I'd been saving for the whole time, and I furnished it slowly with my own paychecks, and there is a particular peace in a home that nobody can lock you out of. My job at the hospital is hard and good. I'm steady there. Cody and I are in a strange new place. He called me a few weeks after the dinner, not to argue, just to say he'd been thinking, and that he was sorry he never asked where things came from. He started pulling back from our mother's orbit, getting his own footing, and I think some part of him is relieved to find out he might be capable of standing on his own too. We'll see. My father and I talk sometimes. He came and helped me move a couch into the apartment, and we didn't say much, and that was its own kind of apology, the only kind he has. My mother and I don't speak. She has never once said she was sorry. Not really. Not in a way that wasn't actually about herself, and I've stopped waiting for it. Because a woman who could stand at her own father's funeral and lie to his granddaughter about his last gift is not a woman who's going to find the bottom of her own conscience at this late hour. I made my peace with that, and the peace is lighter than the hope ever was. I keep Pop Leo's napkin in a frame now, on the wall of my own kitchen, the soft yellow paper and the careful slanted print. For when you have to stand on your own. I read it some mornings with my coffee. He gave me money. Yes. And it mattered. But that was never the real gift. The real gift was that one person in my life saw exactly who I was, and exactly who my mother was, and trusted me to figure it out before it was too late. I figured it out. A little late. But I figured it out on my own. The people who keep telling you you're helpless are very often the ones counting on you, never checking the balance. They locked the door and called me desperate. The card, the screen, the napkin my grandfather folded when I was 18. If someone in your life keeps insisting you're helpless, ask yourself what they're hoping you'll never look at. Sometimes standing on your own just means finally checking the balance. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me your story in the comments,